So you ready to talk a little Frankenstein created woman?
I am. I was
Okay.
ready to talk strip nude for your killer, but nobody else was apparently.
Well, I was, but
Not no one else. Sorry.
yes.
I assume that you were ready.
Yes, and that's a great plug for what's coming up live on Sunday at 2 p.m. Central. We're going to be talking Strip Nude for a Killer for Academia Giallo, which was supposed to be last week, but yeah, we had a couple of folks with things come up, so hopefully we'll have a full house. That'll be nice. But yes, we are outside of the Academia, and we're back in the car traveling through Hammerland. And yes, that car is a hearse with a convertible top somehow. So Aaron,
I still always picture us on a horse driven carriage.
I'm telling you, there's horsepower under that hood. Okay, for next month, remind me. We'll trade in the car for a good horse-drawn carriage.
We have to. I mean, it's just more romantic that way.
Indeed, but you've seen what happens in these movies when people take horse-drawn carriages through the lands,
It's true.
including this movie that we're about to talk about, which is 1967's Frankenstein Created Woman, directed by our favorite MVP of the Hammer horror movies, Terence Fisher, back in the saddle. That's another horse metaphor. Help me out with this one. When we talked about the Dracula movie last month, you had said that we were entering a period where the Dracula films from then on in the Hammer canon were going to get a lot more dodgier. Is the same true for Frankenstein? Because I feel like a movie called Frankenstein Created Woman should be terrible. I loved this movie. So where do you stand on this?
I feel, and I may have said this before, but I feel like Evil of Frankenstein is the dip in quality, and that it's all pretty great from here.
Okay, good.
Yeah, there's like I really love this movie. Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed, which is our next one in the series. That's my personal favorite. And then Frankenstein and the Monster from Hell, which is the last one in the Frankenstein series. That one has its moments of questionable, but I still find it really entertaining. So I think we're going to end on a high note, and with it will balance our Draculas. Let's put it that way.
Okay, good. So let's talk about you mentioned Evil of Frankenstein was the last film, and that one you mentioned that dip. It's a very odd kind of film. The Dr. Frankenstein character that Peter Cushing plays is markedly different than how we've seen him before. This movie feels like a return to form, and even accentuating what makes Dr. Frankenstein so cool, which is that he is so obsessed with his work. The movie is almost going on around him, and he is literally just scribbling notes into notebooks at his desk. And occasionally someone throws a rock in his window and says, "You're in the movie."
Literally. Yeah. No, I think I thought it was kind of great courage for Anthony Hines, producer Anthony Hines, screenwriter, to kind of relegate Frankenstein almost to a supporting role in his own movie. I mean, he is the prime mover. He is the one who creates the experiment from which everything follows. But he's, as you say, he's not center stage, and I still find it a really entertaining and fascinating film. I love the concept for this film. I love the idea of kind of a little synopsis is, like, as opposed to the other Frankenstein films where it's really preoccupied itself with the reanimation of dead flesh or the reattachment of, somebody else's dead flesh. Here, he's preoccupied with the idea of capturing the soul from somebody who is expiring. And this is kind of the most sci-fi, I think, of any of the Frankensteins, certainly that we've seen today, but probably, overall. The notion of, well, we're going to create this device that will create a force field around the dead body and capture the soul as a glowing orb. And then we can transplant that soul into another dead body and bring it to life that way. Who needs electricity when you got human souls running around?
Well, it's really strange because have you seen the Joe Dante movie Explorers from 1985?
To my eternal shame, I have not.
Oh, okay. Well, because I watched that last night, because I'm going to be talking about that on a podcast later tonight, actually, strangely enough.
Had you
But
seen it before last night?
not for like 30 years.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a movie with like it's crazy. It's like a 13-year-old Ethan Hawke and River Phoenix
Wow.
playing kids who basically they get a call from an alien intelligence that helps them build a spaceship to go meet that alien intelligence. And part of the way they get up there is using garbled computer science magic to create a force field that surrounds the ship that takes them up. So then this morning I'm watching Frankenstein Created Woman. I'm like, okay, so this is the motif of this week, is invisible force fields that capture improbable things.
I love that. I will make an effort. It sounds like you like it.
Explorers?
Yeah.
I'm gonna yeah, I do like it. I think I was way too tired when I watched it last night because but it reminded me of how I felt about it in childhood, which is the first hour is really strong. When they get up to space, it gets a little bit slow cinema and trippy to the point
Hmm.
where not a whole lot happens. You could have condensed everything that happens in the last 40 minutes into about 15.
Okay.
But, again, I'm a fan of slow cinema. So we'll talk about that, or I'll talk about that later. You can
No,
listen
I
to it.
look forward to hearing your yes, and I'll make an effort to watch it in the meantime so I can fully appreciate your feelings.
Well, if we see each other, soon, I can actually lend you the Blu-ray, which is out now from Shout Factory. And speaking of which, we have Frankenstein Created Woman, the Blu-ray from Scream Factory.
What a great Blu-ray that is, by the way. Highly recommended in terms of extras and commentaries and just the quality. That film looks amazing. I really think they did a fantastic job with it.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to dive into it, but I'll gotta say, for me, it's the only way to watch this movie because I tried renting it, I tried finding it, and I couldn't. And in fact,
Hmm.
when I went to Amazon, I got the last available copy the day that I ordered it, so I got in
Wow.
right at the proper time. But yeah, it's almost a shame that it's not more widely available because for as cheesy as the title sounds, it is a fascinating exploration. And getting back to what you were talking about as far as trapping the human soul, I feel like this really is, even though the continuity is all busted from the previous movies, probably for the best, it is an evolution to what Dr. Frankenstein has been trying to do. He's been experimenting with the dead bodies, everything from, cracking the brain on a table or whatever happened in that first one, to, a semi-intelligent monster. In this case, he really just wants to put the spirit on hold until he can perfect the body and then re-inject it back in. And what I love about this film is it takes the time to tell us about the bodies that are being tampered with by this monster, Dr. Frankenstein, so that by the time this resurrection happened, we understand that there are stakes in this story that he had no idea. He's like, oh yeah, I'll just put the body in the thing, I'll open it back up, but it has a life of its own and a purpose, and it's just
Yes.
beautiful.
Agreed. Yeah. Well, and just because you mentioned the title, I agree. It's a silly title, and it was kind of, I don't. It's the most playful title, I think, because they were riffing on Roger Vadim's "And God Created Woman," which had come out with Brigitte Bardot the year before. So like I love the fact that they're like having a little fun with their horror, even though it plays itself relatively straight. There's not a lot of comedy here, although you have Thorley Walters, who is playing Dr. Hertz, Cushing, Frankenstein's able hands. What little continuity there is from Evil of Frankenstein is that apparently when the laboratory blew up, it burned the doctor's hands so badly that he couldn't work. Now,
Okay.
I mean, that's a pretty localized explosion. So well done, Dr. Frankenstein. But that's the idea, is that his hands have been damaged, and I think they maintain continuity. I know it shows up again in Frankenstein, the Monster from Hell. He has an assistant that does the fine work for him. I can't remember if it's in Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed. I have a feeling that it is.
Well, because I didn't even pick up on that, but as you mentioned it, yeah, he's constantly wearing black gloves throughout the film.
Right.
But correct me if I'm wrong, at the end of Evil of Frankenstein, isn't that the one where the lab, or maybe it's a different one, but does the lab blows up, but isn't he also killed and brought back as a Frankenstein monster, or was that one of the
That's
other ones?
that's the Revenge of Frankenstein is when he's killed and brought back when he gets beaten to death by the inmates.
Okay, all right.
And then Evil of Frankenstein is where the monster drinks, formaldehyde, freaks out, and everything blows up.
That's right. Was that Frankenstein? I don't remember because I watched too many movies, but was that Frankenstein the reanimated Frankenstein, or had they left that concept kind of behind? That no, it's
I
still
mean,
just the guy. I thought it was just him as a regular man.
in theory, he could just be. I mean, when he comes back as Dr. Frank or Dr. Stein or whatever he comes back as at the end of Revenge of Frankenstein, I can only assume that that's the ongoing Frankenstein, moving through evil into created woman, etc. So I think we have to say yes. The guy at the end of Revenge of Frankenstein is still the Frankenstein that we're dealing with today.
So weird.
Well, also the fact that they were able to find, a corpse that looked really shockingly similar to, Frankenstein.
Well, either that or they just found an amazing, I don't even know if it's plastic surgeon, but skin graft artist.
Some grafting, yeah. Because, you want to look like the guy who died when you're on the run.
Well, that's what's crazy about the small town in this movie.
Yes.
Is everybody is remarkably stupid and superstitious and greedy and rapacious. They don't mention, I mean, they talk about there's rumblings of how they think he's a witch doctor or in league with the devil or something, but there isn't really talk about continuity from, oh yeah, there's rumors that you're the same guy who did all these experiments. He seemed
Right.
to have found a remote beautiful village in the middle of nowhere to just set up shop for. He mentioned 6 months. I feel like he had to have been working there for longer, but
yeah, I forget the timeline on it, but yes, they seem to be. I mean, I get that sense that they're aware of a Frankenstein, but we don't deal a lot with his sordid history.
yeah.
But he's advertising himself as such. He's not hiding under a pseudonym.
Right. Now, as far as the other thing that threw me about this, and I had to go back and look at my notes because there's some cross-pollination between the Frankenstein and Dracula universes. There is a character in this movie named Mr. Cleve.
Yes.
Now, I don't know if you have any insight on that. Is this supposed to be like a little unified Monsterverse nod, or is it coincidence?
I will forgive you the oversight, but it's Clove in the Dracula universe.
Sorry, Cleve, Clove.
Okay. No, I mean, so yeah, Cleve is the owner of the tavern who has the daughter Christine, who we should just kind of like mention. The idea is that Frankenstein has not only is he working with Dr. Hertz, but he also has an assistant named Hans, and Hans has a soft spot in his heart for the crippled and scarred Christine, and Hans's backstory is that he saw his father executed as a very young boy. We assume for the crime of murder, because they say like father, like son later on, when Hans himself is accused of murder. But the two Hans and Christine are lovers, and Cleve, Mr. Cleve, is running the tavern, and into said tavern come these three society swells who they love to torment young Christine and antagonize her and make fun. And because they are high society swells, there's that sense that they can kind of do whatever they want because apparently their fathers run the town or something. We never actually meet their fathers or from whence their power springs.
Yeah, I just call them the too tall top hat crew, because when they come in, there's a lot of parallels here. I don't remember when the novel A Clockwork Orange was written. I know the movie didn't come out for a few years after this one, but man, these guys are just, they reminded me of Alex and the Droogs,
Yeah.
uh, complete with beating an old man to death. Spoiler alert.
Yep.
But yeah, just this weird kind of entitlement, this rage, this abuse of women, and just like ripping apart anybody that gets in the way of their fun. But yeah, Anton is the lead guy, uh, who comes into the bar and insists that their drinks be served by Christina, who her father, Mr. Cleve, kind of keeps in the back because she's, it was unclear to me. She hides her, what I'll call a deformity, with this kind of red hair over half of her face, all Jessica Rabbit style. But we don't see that much of it. So it could have been, I don't know if it was scarring. It looked to me just like a large birthmark or
Yeah, I think
something.
it's a birth. I think it's a birth defect.
Yeah.
And then same thing with her hand and foot. Uh,
Yeah. So Anton insists, at the threat of her father losing his license, to have her come out and serve drinks. It's a setup because they know that she can not walk very well. She can't walk and balance a tray full of drinks. And so they just want to see her, humiliated. And fortunately, I think when she is humiliated, it's by spilling wine all over this jerk's lap. But there's a complication because Hans, who's in the tavern because he had been sent to get some celebratory champagne for the doctor and Dr. Hertz, he steps in, gets into this wonderful fight with these gentlemen. They're not gentlemen. Slashes one across the face. The cops come in. They break the whole thing up. This is where, yeah, Anton's power and his family kind of comes into question for me, because Mr. Cleve says, I don't want to press charges against, Hans. And then Anton says, I'll press charges. And then the cop says, so in court, it's going to be you and your two friends ganging up on one person. How's that
right.
going to look?
Right.
If he were really that high powered, I imagine, yeah, we can make that happen.
Sure.
or the attorney will step in and throw this kid in a prison.
Yeah, I did appreciate the fact that the cops were kind of like, uh, they weren't. I mean, even though they are portrayed as bumblers for the duration of the film, they have one moment of clarity.
Right. And that moment of clarity also shows the audience that there are limits to Anton's influence, even though he goes throwing around the whole, do you know who my dad is? And like, yeah, but he's not the king or whatever.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And so this whole story is really about this kind of doomed relationship between Christina and Hans and these three bullies that kind of follow them around the town. Um, Later, when the Droogs beat Christina's father to death for the crime of going back into his tavern after the lights were out and seeing, a burglar saying, you come out, and then three of them that should jump him, Hans is framed for the murder, based on the evidence that they found his coat at the scene of the crime.
Right.
And at one point he had said, I'll kill you. But that's the extent of the investigation whenever this movie was set.
Well, and his father was a murderer.
Oh, that's right. His father.
That's the big evidence, is that, well, your father was a murderer, therefore you must also be a murderer. That's small town mindset.
Right. And it's not much better when they actually get to court. This movie has a court scene, which I thought was like an extended one. I thought that was really fun. I assume this is historical accuracy, but when they have witnesses up on the stand, they're standing. And I thought, wait, the witness stand. Whenever you see courtroom dramas today, everyone's like sitting and all that. But
Right.
I assume that's where it came from. I'm like, oh, that's kind of a neat little rub.
Well, and you also have the opportunity for, Cushing as Frankenstein to deliver some really dry, pithy comments, just basically putting down the inspector and everybody else.
What I loved was, I think Hertz testified beforehand, and the prosecutor, I can't remember the line. I think I have it somewhere here. Essentially, Hertz acts surprised when he finds out that he's there to testify because Hans has been accused of murder. He's like, wait, what? No one briefed me on the way to this murder case.
So I think that's an ample time to talk about Dr. Hertz, because we've talked a little bit about kind of like Frankenstein's perhaps questionable choice of assistants from time to time, and his choice of Hertz is a really odd one to me, uh, because he's such a, like he just seems like a man completely lost in the wilderness almost the entire time, and like unless Frankenstein is just using that quality to accomplish his own means, you would think that he would want somebody who could match him intellectually, or at least, play in the same ballpark. Whereas Hertz just feels like somebody who apparently has a reputation, has some money, and has a capable pair of hands.
I think he's the perfect stooge in that regard. And I think that is also the evolution in Frankenstein's experimentation, not just with the monster, but with his choice of assistants. The first time we saw him was with, that young prodigy that he brought up, who eventually turned against him because he was too smart and had too much of a conscience. So they ended up dueling. I
Right.
think at this point, having someone who was good at his job, but was also kind of an affable member of the community would help to. I think that's the only reason that the superstitious folks weren't banging down the door, because they're like, well, Dr. Hertz, we all know him. He's kind of an eccentric, whatever, but he's Dr. Hertz. And if
Right.
he's living with Frankenstein, Frankenstein can't be that bad, because Hertz wouldn't stand up for a murderer.
Right. And I think, one of the commentaries, they commented on the fact that there's a bit of a Holmes and Watson dynamic going on, which is funny because, Peter Cushing did play Sherlock Holmes at one point. And this is very much, even though in that film, Hound of the Baskervilles, Andre Morel, who played his Watson, is a very capable Watson, whereas Thorley Walters kind of harkens back to the Basil Rathbone and Nigel Hawthorne dynamic, where one of them is brilliant, one of them is just like, oh my God, you're so brilliant. Which is kind of what we get here over and over again, is Dr. Hertz going, oh my God, you're so smart. Please spell it out for me. I don't get it.
Well, he's also the stand-in for the audience, although I think the audience is even way far ahead of where Hertz is at. Because at one point, Hertz says, I'm sorry, you're just going to have to spell this out for me. I'm like, wow.
Yeah, he literally says that. Yeah.
But it's, which is fine, because it is an oddball idea. And as you mentioned, this sci-fi aspect to it. All of these movies are science fiction to an extent, but you kind of can buy that, well, if you juice a body with enough electricity, sure, maybe it comes to life. But this really is a matter of this mystical kind of orb that you can contain the ineffable essence of the human soul and keep it in a box for an indefinite amount of time, with hopefully electricity keeping it on. Like if the power runs out in that box, what happens to the spirit?
Right.
Or does it just stay in there? And in which case, do you even need the electricity? It reminded me of the ecto containment unit from Ghostbusters, which would come along 2 decades later.
So I'm looking up really quick because I want to talk about Susan Denberg.
Oh, Christine. Yes.
Yes.
The lovely Christine, who I think she gives kind of 2 performances in this movie and almost 3. And I'm going to need your help on that third one, which we'll get to. So as the daughter of Cleve, she's very, shy. She's obviously had kind of a hard life because of her deformity, and frankly, probably because of her father wanting to keep her sheltered from people because of what they'd say.
Right.
But on the other hand, she is spirited in her own way. She doesn't, she agrees to go out and serve the drinks, to get the guys to shut up and also protect her dad. She makes the first move really on Hans when they're, turning off the light to make out. And then she's a tragic figure when she kills herself because Hans is executed for this crime. But when she comes back, when she's resurrected, there's this nice little mystery, because I was thinking, wait a second, they brought her back. What did they do with Hans's spirit, whom they stole the body, or they requisitioned the body, they stole it to trap his spirit orb in this box. But then the person we see come back is Christina. It turns out it's Hans, kind of in her body, because as Frankenstein mentions, sometimes he's there, but not always. So this third performance is kind of the subservient Christine, whatever's left of her essence, which is somehow, I guess, still trapped in the body because it wasn't sucked out. What is going on here?
So and I think that is the question, is that I think, yes, sometimes it's Hans's spirit, sometimes it's Hans's soul, but yeah, sometimes the question consistently that's asked by Christine is, who am I? Mm-hmm. She doesn't recognize who she is, but she's not just like Hans living inside. Like, it's not just Hans's consciousness living inside, except for when it is. So I feel like yes, but I don't feel like it's Christine's essence that's there. It's just kind of like this, a blank slate, as it were, that kind of flickers in and out.
Well,
so I don't feel like we ever actually get any sense of Christine's essence. We get Hans and his revenge, and we get this blank slate who doesn't quite understand what's happening.
Well, and that blank slate is what I am attributing to Christine. It's the base level of the thing that is occupying her body, because at the very end, after Hans has exacted his revenge, which is sort of on behalf of him and Christine,
right?
He says something to the effect of like, my work here is done. You're free to go. And that's when she sort of going to this like Adam and Eve metaphor, she realizes she's naked and what she's done, not literally naked, and she throws herself off a cliff. So that's what I was wondering. Is any of that Christine, or what she would understand as being Christine, or is it kind of a blank slate person, which opens up all sorts of kind of mystical, ethical questions as well?
Yeah, I feel like we weren't able to capture Christine's soul because she died of natural causes, and they weren't able to get the body soon enough to capture her soul. So she was kind of an empty vessel that they put Hans's soul inside of.
Right, but that brings up the question of like, because there's very much a consciousness of time in here, because Frankenstein, who we breezed right past his introduction in this movie, which is, well, first of all, there's sort of these two weird red herrings. One is the opening shot, which is the beautiful upshot of the guillotine, which is a motif that comes back, keeps recycling through the movie to great effect, I think. But when I saw that, I'm like, wait a second, are we back to like 2 or 3 movies now where the last time we saw Frankenstein, he was about to be executed? But no, this is Hans's father's story. And then Hans, the second misdirect is the introduction of Frankenstein. Dr. Hertz and Hans are in the lab, and they pull this giant like concrete coffin out of a freezer, and they open up and it's Peter Cushing. And like, oh my God, is this the resurrected Frankenstein that we saw at the end 2 movies ago? No, it's just him, I was going to say recreating, but probably just inventing the movie Flatliners. He killed himself for an hour and then demanded to be brought back. So there's this hour timeline that, as you mentioned, Christina's body didn't have the luxury of, because they just found her body in the river, then brought it to Hertz and Frankenstein. So I guess my question is, does the soul leave the body after an hour? If it does, is it all in one fell swoop, or is it kind of like letting the air out of a beach ball, where it's like it just gradually kind of leaves? Because if we're talking about a base consciousness here, and I know this is getting way trippier for a movie called Frankenstein Created Woman, but if the soul of Hans is put into this woman, but it's not the only thing in there, is it just that there is this residual base personality that might be part Christina? There might be a 25% remnant, because otherwise you're just putting a soul into a literally empty vessel, in which case you'd think it would take up the whole beach ball.
Yeah, it would just be Hans, right? Exactly. Right. Yeah, I think, I mean, that's actually really fascinating, because or is it just kind of like, as you say, like just kind of the life force that exists, but not necessarily anything that's residual from Christine's life? It's just, it is a female life source. Let's just, for our sake of argument, that there's a sense of female life source there, with a little bit of, with Hans's soul kind of figuring its way out within it.
Which reminds me of The Man with Two Brains. Kind of.
So Susan Denberg was the Playmate of the Month, I want to say just a few months prior to getting cast in this role.
Okay.
Playboy's Playmate of the Month, which, leads to how she got cast, because that's part of the Hammer glamour. But I think she does like a fantastic job here. I think she does a really nice performance. As you say, kind of playing those three different aspects. There's the kind of pathetic, wounded, and somewhat deformed, shy, version of her. Then there's the version of her like kind of just wondering after she's been reawakened, like, what am I? Who am I? And then there's this kind of like femme fatale that she takes on. And, like, I really feel like she does a really terrific job. And if you add in the fact that her performance is completely dubbed by another actress.
Really?
Nikki Vandersill, who also dubbed Ursula Andress in Dr. No for James Bond, and for Hammer for the film She. Nikki Vandersill did that as well. But she did the entirety of Susan Denberg's performance because Denberg's accent was deemed a little too excessive. She had a German accent.
Wow, I didn't even notice that. I mean, that's, when you say that she was cast, possibly a large part of it due to that whole Playboy status. First of all, she keeps her clothes on the entire movie, except, I mean, there is a scene where she's naked in bed with Hans, but
we don't see anything, right?
Right. You see her arm, which the framing of that was so weird because it almost looked like her elbow was coming out of where her breast should be. I'm like, wait a second, is that what is that curvature I'm looking at? I don't know.
Well, there's a funny story on the commentary. The actor, I'm blanking on his name, who plays Hans.
Oh, Robert Morris.
Robert Morris. So
of Robert Morris College fame. No, I'm just kidding.
Exactly. But they talked about during that scene that he was told by Terence Fisher that his right shoulder had to cover her left nipple, and that he could not move. Like, he had to just stay there and like just be completely static and not move at all, because they wanted to keep both of them naked but not reveal anything. And the other thing that Morris revealed in the commentary was that during the fight scene, there was supposed to be a breakaway chair that was smashed over him that didn't exactly break away. And so, like, he had these massive bruises on his back. So they put him on his back. They told him he had to stay in one spot. And he was just like, I just felt like it was the least romantic scene ever, because I'm just like basically just stuck in one position.
I like to think that the direction was, okay, Robert, for this next scene, you're going to be in bed with this lovely naked woman. I need you to be as stiff as possible. Sorry.
Not a problem, Terence.
But yeah, I mean, but what I was getting back to with the Playmate thing is, regardless of whether she was dubbed, she keeps her clothes on the entire movie, although she is very sexy and sexual when it comes, when that becomes important. But there is so much nuance to the way that she plays these three parts. Yep. That, it's just a hell of a performance. And when she gets into revenge mode, where she goes after the three droogs, first of all, I love the playfulness, the confusing, disorienting playfulness of each of the murders. Like, when Anton gets what's coming to him, it goes from what you imagine is her attacking him with the big cleaver or something, because we never actually see her in the frame. We just see his surprise reaction, cutting to the guillotine axe falling and then being raised up with the blood splatter. A similar thing where another character definitely gets his head cut off. It's so much fun, especially when you cut to her chopping the wood and she's all gleeful about it. It's just, this is the kind of nuance that we don't, this depth of a character and these complexities. I want to see more of that in modern performances. Yeah.
I mean, and the fact, again, the fact that it's not all about Frankenstein. It really, the showcase, she is the showcase, she has the showcase role in the film. So here's another fun fact, is that because of the accent, because they originally recorded Denberg's voice, and the concern about the accent came later. So the actor who plays Cleve, her dad, who is, one moment,
Alan McNaughton. Sorry, I've got.
Thank you. So Alan McNaughton was doing his performance with a German accent because he wanted those two to match. So then they change Christine's accent to a posh English accent. And so Alan McNaughton had to go back and re-record all of his lines. He had to go back and dub all of his lines with an English accent.
Oh my gosh.
So fun stuff. I mean, again, when you think about that and you watch kind of like how, I think both of their performances, McNaughton and Denberg, are really terrific. And you think about the fact that both of them are dubbed entirely after the fact.
Yeah, I couldn't tell when I was watching. I think I might have picked up on, something here or there, but I thought it was just kind of like a sound, issue, not with dubbing, but just an idiosyncrasy of the time.
Right.
But one thing was really fascinating about this is the fact that in the previous Frankenstein movies, we go from literal body parts robbed from graves and stitched together to I say it was a couple of these Frankenstein movies ago. I don't remember which one, but it was like the regular kind of put together handsome man who, as he became the monster, his eyes start to droop again, and he kind of took on those deformed movements. But now we have a character who begins as a physically deformed, monster, quote unquote, who becomes this beautiful woman, and the evil or the sinister motives is all contained within. It's this beautiful, almost Pet Cemetery kind of a callback or call forward.
And I find that a call forward. Yes. I also, I mean, I love how they never quite explain why they decided to give her a makeover. Like how it came to be that like now the birthmark's gone. And I mean, Cushing has like just a kind of a throwaway line of, see, the hair did change color. And you're like, what? you mean you anticipated this? Okay, great.
Well, because it's a 6-month flash forward between the death of Hans and Christine to when she's resurrected as we see her. Because yes, as you mentioned, her face is now completely, I'll say, beautified.
Yeah.
Her physical deformities, the limp and everything, she's got her full capabilities and the blonde hair. I feel like that is sort of, this motive can be attributed to, I think, his assistance from previous films, but there is the idea of once we conquer death, we're going to show the scientific community. So I feel like Frankenstein and or his assistant have learned from the past mistakes to say, all right, we can't just go showing people this horrible deformed monster because they're going to know that it's been us for the last decade. But also if they could say, yeah, it was us, but hey, we've got this beautiful, well-spoken, intelligent specimen who is a miracle of science.
Yeah, I'm surprised that they didn't mention it. I wonder if there's a deleted scene somewhere where they talk about what you just mentioned, like what the reasons for the aesthetics. Like this is actually going to serve us. My first one, boy, didn't go over so well.
And Christopher Lee is like, hey, no, But one of the other things I love about this movie is at the end, it's not Frankenstein being driven out of town. Really, I mean, you can kind of imply it because the mob does show up at his door, but he evades them. He's not getting blown up or killed or resurrected. He tries to stop his creation from throwing herself off a cliff. And by try, I mean, it's sort of that Willy Wonka, like, no, don't, please. He just turns around and like sulks back into the woods like, okay, I've proven I can do this. I'll just go do it again. Damn it.
Right. Which is funny because he's not going to do it again. Spoiler, folks.
What?
He's not going to. I love how in Revenge of Frankenstein, he basically succeeds in his experiment.
But wasn't it because the person left the door open or something to let the creature out?
Well, no, what I mean is like when he's resurrected at the end of Revenge of Frankenstein.
Oh, him. Yes. Okay.
I mean, basically, that's success. You brought somebody back from the dead. Should we do that again? Nah, let's go on to this soul thing. Great. And then we figured that one out. Yeah, let's not do that either. So Frankenstein I think he just has short-term memory. I think he's a brilliant scientist who just can't remember that he succeeded. And so he keeps thinking he has to try something new.
Yeah. And it's a continuity. Like, I think because these movies came out, as we've kind of discussed before, unless you catch these things when they come out or at a revival, like maybe leading up to the new one, you're not going back to your home video collection to like catch up on your own to say that didn't line up with the last movie. It's been a few years. They're probably like, maybe I kind of
Think about an explosion, but maybe it's fine.
I think, well, also you mentioned that. I'm like, it's worth pointing out that it had been 10 years, 67, and then Revenge of Frankenstein was 58, right?
Was
It's
it
been
that
like,
long or that early?
yeah, because 57 was Curse of Frankenstein. I feel like it came out the next year, or maybe 59. But anyway, so it had been like 10 years, or almost 10 years, since Terence Fisher had directed a Frankenstein movie. And it had been almost 10 years since we had seen Frankenstein outside of that kind of alternate universe evil of Frankenstein.
Yeah, you're right. Revenge of Frankenstein was 58. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, it's been almost 10 years. I think you bring up an interesting point about Cushing's interpretation of Frankenstein this time around. He's not nearly he's still driven, but there isn't that sense of malevolence. He's not willing to murder anybody. He's not, he's just basically working with the dead bodies at hand. Nobody else has to die at his hand. He doesn't have kind of like the darkness that we've seen him use in the previous films. He's actually almost kind of a benevolent figure. He's certainly still impatient and intolerant of dullards and dopes around him, but like he's trying. He testifies on the behalf of Hans, and he says that there's no way this guy. Well, he says there's almost no way this guy could be a murderer, but then can't say absolutely, and that's what seals his fate.
Well, and that's to the first point, because there's two.
Yeah.
The first point, I think you're right. He is a different kind of character. He's more in character than he was in the last film. But I feel like along with the evolution of experiments comes his understanding that he can achieve what he wants. He just needs to be patient about it. You're right. He doesn't need to go out and like murder people and stitch things together. He's been there. He's done that. It didn't work. So he's going to try something else. So it's like he's taken all of that energy and just put it back into jotting down notes and being observant about things.
Yep.
But that bit in the courtroom, I didn't think anything of it until the following scene where I was like, you slick bastard, because the prosecutor says, Frankenstein testifies, he says something about, Hans being a good person or, not capable of hurting anybody. And the prosecutor said, so you're 100% sure that he could never murder anyone. And then there's almost like a light that goes on in the very back of his head. And he says, well, not entirely sure he couldn't kill somebody. The next scene is he and Hertz going into their home, and Frankenstein is basically almost tap dancing. He's like, we're going to get our body. We're going to get our body. It's going to be Hans. Just got to be patient.
Oh, man.
It's so dark.
I have to go back and watch it through your lens, because in my mind, I thought he was simply being 100% truthful, which is no, he couldn't absolutely say that he was because the judge says unlikely but not impossible, and the response is no, not impossible. And I didn't see the glint in his eye that you're referring to, so now I have to go back and watch it again and be like, wait, is that there? Is Cushing like
I don't know if it was a glint in his eye, but I feel like I could see the little back room in the back of his brain, because I believe he was being truthful when he said, I don't think he could kill anybody, but that doesn't mean that he couldn't.
Sure.
It's a choice for him whether or not he says that in court.
Well, I mean, sure. But I feel like, yeah, right. It's not like, Frankenstein holds himself to the laws of the land, as it were.
Right. So yeah, happy little accidents, as Bob Ross might say. Is there anything else that we're missing?
Well, it's worth noting, I think, that like Thorley Walters, who plays Dr. Hertz, we just saw him in the last movie, Frankenstein or Dracula, Prince of Darkness. He plays the Renfield type character.
That's where I recognize him from. Again, I think as I get older, my ability to absorb the information I take in movies, the window is shrinking to like maybe 4 days because I kept thinking, is that Dr. Bombay from Bewitched? Turns out I was a totally different guy.
Not the same guy, but yes, and watching him, it's still a broad performance. I think both performances are pretty broad, but I feel like there's some range exhibited by Thorley Walters, and there's a reason why he's a Hammer favorite. Is that he does always make an impression.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and it wasn't, as we kind of mentioned, this isn't an outright comedic movie, but there are kind of lighter characters, including this guy who is not the dope that we've seen in some of these other Hammer films. It's that perfect balance. It's still like dramatic acting, but it's a little bit silly in concept. But
Yes.
even that silliness, as we discussed, might be serving the larger, darker story, which is
Well,
always
and
fun.
I really like how, I mean, in his, he does kind of, I think I described him as like, he's like this world traveler who, like, everything Frankenstein says, he's just like, oh my gosh, my mind is blown once again. But then there's the scene when he's blackmailing the jailer to
Oh, yeah.
get Hans's body, and you like go, ooh, Dr. Hertz, look at you. Like nobody else could have done that. He was the one who had the goods on the jailer.
Well, and also you think about what those goods were, because he's basically saying, I know all the infidelity that you perpetrate on your wife, some of which involve lots of sores. And the other one involves taking care of that one girl who got a little too heavy all of a sudden.
Right.
Like, wow. And this is like Dr. Bombay. I'm surprised. No. But yeah, you're right. That's a really kind of creepy moment, even though it goes by really quickly when you stop to think about what that means, because you're playing the other movie in your head. It's like, ugh, give me the
Yeah.
willies.
Right. But yeah, I feel like it's a really solid, entertaining film. I feel like things move right along pace wise. You're introduced to characters. Everybody, it's as deserted as the town can seem at times. The characters that we do get introduced to all make a really strong impression. I mean, I think all three of the society swells are appropriately awful. And like the innkeeper, the head of police. I mean, I just feel like everybody like has a nice moment in the sun.
Well, and about those three droogs, the last thing I'll say is that it reminded me of another movie, and I don't know if this particular thing, and I know there's many people yelling at their screens right now. Before this film, were there other movies of a woman who seeks revenge on the three people who kind of attacked her? Because I was getting serious, I Spit on Your Grave vibes, which again
Yeah.
would come out like 10 years after this, but it's the idea of this pack mentality of people ganging up on a woman, and then she kind of gets her wits about her or dies, as in the case in a way, I think it was Camille Keaton in that movie, right? She kind of comes back and exacts revenge, gets them all on their own one-on-one, and exposes their vulnerabilities and exploits those vulnerabilities to horrifically kill them.
I don't think anybody has ever made that connection. And as you make it before me now, I go, that's kind of great. Because yes, I mean, at the end of in I Spit on Your Grave, it is as though the character has died and she is resurrected and basically reinvented as an avenging angel.
Yeah,
Which
who
is
uses the
basically what we
sexuality to lure in the guys. Yeah.
right. And she just taps into that and uses her sexuality, which was what was taken from her.
And I can't mention a Hammer / Giallo film. We can't have a discussion without me referencing Friday the 13th gratuitously. That whole thing of like the head on the post with saying,
Man.
you've got to go kill them for me. I'm like, oh, wow.
Yeah, I had forgotten about that, which is funny because I've seen this film a few times. But like the notion of the re-embodied Hans going to get his own head out of the coffin. Like, what kind of messed up stuff is going on there?
Well, on top of that, there's and this is where kind of what sparked my questioning about the consciousnesses in embodying that body of Christine. Uh, I don't see it coming naturally for a guy to come back from the dead, inhabit the body of a woman, and say, "Now I'm going to use my feminine wiles to practically, sleep with the people, like seduce these guys." I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm just saying there's probably some outtakes somewhere of him like, how do you seduce a guy again? I don't know.
Right, right. Well, and also, if you think about just the male energy, you just like go, why wouldn't he, the second he gets them alone, just mash their brains in? Like why he decides to toy with them and then kill them in all three instances.
Right. I think that's more of the fine point of like, if we got them alone together, do that instead of saying, "Hey, you want to come put your hands up all on me and let's make out?" I'm like, I don't know. That's not my jam.
I don't think of Hans that way.
Hands off. No. So yeah, I think that's probably a good place to leave it. I'm so happy we watched this. I'm actually glad that I couldn't rent it because I'm happy to own this this Blu-ray so I can go watch those special features. This is a remarkable movie.
Yeah, and I've listened to both the commentary tracks at this point, and both of them are wonderful, and there's not a lot of overlap. The Haberman and Nazir is more of a kind of a scholarly approach, and then there's one where they have the actor who plays Hans and the actor who plays Johann, one of the Droogs, and they have a lovely walk down memory lane together, and it's pretty terrific.
That's cool. All right. Well, this conversation has been pretty terrific, and we're stopped. We have gone through Hammerland. We're now going to stop off in the quote unquote real world. I'm going to let you out here while I drive and put the car in the garage. Again, I'm butchering this metaphor. It's terrible, but thank you. I didn't even introduce you at the beginning. That's how excited I was to get to the movie. Aaron Christensen of Horror 101 with Dr. AC. Thank you so much for joining me, and we'll be talking again on Sunday, as you mentioned, to talk. A movie that doesn't have a whole lot of like strongly drawn female characters in it. Strip
Nope.
Nude for Your Killer. I'm really curious to hear what the guys think about this one.
As am I, because that was my first time watching it as well. So,
I don't think I remember that. Now that it's ringing a bell, but yeah, I'm pretty sure that the environment that led to the Me Too movement started with this film in 1975.
Unnecessary evil, if you were.
Oh man. Yeah. All right. So thank you very much. It's been great talking to you, and we'll get in the car or the horse-drawn carriage next month and continue our journey through Hammerland. What are we talking about next month? Do you remember?
I don't. It's 68, so I wonder if we're back to Dracula with Taste the Blood of Dracula.
I've got my spreadsheet here. Dracula has risen from the grave.
Dracula's risen from the grave. That's right.
Okay.
Oh, good. That's a fun one.
Okay, I'll take fun over abysmal any day. I just want to get back to this Frankenstein that you're telling me about for the next one.
It's not abysmal.
Okay. All right. Take care, sir. Thanks again, and we'll catch you later.
Adios.
Bye.